So good evening from Chokoloskee Island. This is the second video of 2 about shooting the Milky Way for the first time. So if you haven't yet, check out my first video or my previous video about do you have what it takes to shoot the Milky Way. So in this video, what I'm going to do is we're going to go out there and we're going to talk about what you need to do while you're out there shooting the Milky Way. We're going to talk about focusing. We're going to talk about ISO and shutter speed settings and why they're so important to minimizing some issues that come up when shooting the night sky. And we're also going to talk about light painting and how to compose Milky Way with an interesting foreground that you're going to light up with a flashlight. So I have all my equipment I need. I have my headlamp, I have my camera and my lens, and I have my tripod and ball head. I'm ready to go. I know when I'm going out. It's going to be an early evening, and I'm going to be getting up around 2 o'clock and heading out, and it's going to be a clear sky. Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to be out here shooting. So now that you're all set up, you got your camera ready, you're set up with your tripod, you have a clear night, and you know where you're going to shoot the Milky Way, and so now you're ready to get your first Milky Way shot. Okay, so let's talk about star streaking. All right, so the stars, the Earth, they move. So if you use an exposure time of, say, 20 seconds or 30 seconds, during that period of time, the star is moving. Now, as a rule, 30 seconds or less than that, you should be able to get a pretty good, sharp image of those stars. You want those stars to look like sharp little pins in the sky. If you go beyond 30 seconds, you're going to start to see more blur, and those round points are going to start looking more oblong. So that's star streaking. So to avoid that, you keep exposure time, you want it below 30 seconds at the most is a good rule. Now, there is this thing called the 500 rule, because one of the things that's going to affect star streaking is the focal length. Okay, so the shorter the focal length, the greater the exposure time you can use before you see star streaking. Let me say that again. The shorter the focal length, the longer the exposure time you can use before you get star streaking. So let's say you have a full frame camera and you have a 16 to 24 millimeter lens attached to it. If you set it at 16 millimeters, what you're going to do is you're going to take 500 and divide it by 16, and you're going to come up with about 31, which really is 30 seconds. Okay, that's telling you that at 16 millimeters, you can set your exposure at 30 seconds and not worry too much about star streaking. That's a good thing because that's giving you more light within that time period, right? So if you set it to 24 millimeters, then take your 500, divide it by 24, and now you have 20 seconds. So you have less time, less exposure time. Now, here's something interesting. If you have a crop factor camera, okay, let's say your crop factor is 1.5. Okay, what you would have to do with that 16 and 24 millimeter focal length is you would have to take 16, multiply that by 1.5. Now you have 24, and you're going to divide 500 by 24, and you have 20 seconds. So that means that at 16 millimeters, you're going to need to set your exposure time no more than 20 seconds if you want to avoid star streaking. Now, what does that mean? 20 seconds, 30 seconds? I mean, what's the big deal there? Well, the difference between 20 and 30 seconds exposure time is about 2/3 stop of light. In other words, you're getting less light into the sensor with 20 seconds. So if that's the case, you're going to have to make up the difference with a higher ISO. So what's the problem with the higher ISO? Well, that's where the noise comes in. So cameras really vary by that. And camera brands, camera models, the newer cameras tend to handle noise much better than the older models. And you have to experiment with your camera and see how high you're willing to push that ISO. You're going to see some graininess as it gets higher and higher, as you put more light into the camera. So, and there's software programs that can help you kind of get rid of some of that, but you're going to have to experiment and figure out what is the maximum ISO you're willing to take it, so that, you know, if you don't want that star streaking, you got to keep the exposure time down, so that means you're going to have to increase the ISO, and that's a trade-off. Star streaking, noise. All right, so the goal here is to get as sharp of an image as you can. So right now we're concentrating on getting a sharp shot of the stars, the Milky Way. All right, once you know where the Milky Way is, and if you have an app to help you, that's great. You set up, you're going to have to kind of play around a little bit to figure out, you know, if you've got a straight horizon line and all of that. But once you're set up to shoot, the next thing you have to do is get your manual focus and get it focused on a star. Now this is where live view comes in so nicely. With live view on, so turn your live view on and you should have a focus magnification. Now you can see my camera here, there's nothing really on the screen to see, but I can, because I'm in live view, I can push a button and I can go into focus magnification. And I can see the stars twinkling, I can see them, and I picked the biggest one. It's actually, I believe that's Jupiter right there. So I am magnifying on that star, and then once I'm magnified and I have it on my screen, I actually like to look through the viewfinder. So I'll come over, look through the viewfinder, and I will adjust my focus ring until that star looks as small as it can get. Okay, you're getting rid of the blurriness. So once I have that, then I'm ready to shoot. I almost forgot, most important, once you get focused, then you need to shut your headlamp off, and any light you have out there, everything has to be dark. Okay, and then hit the shutter button. All right, so you examine your image, magnify and look to see that, that you're getting sharpness where you need it, and then recompose. And you can use your headlamp to help you to recompose. So I can shine a light on a tree. If I want that tree to be in my image, then I just shine a light on it and I can see exactly where it is and make sure that it's straight and right, and then refocus. So every single time, sorry about that, every single time that you move the camera, move the tripod, you need to refocus. So sometimes you want to make the foreground a more prominent part of the composition. So you want to actually see the foreground. So if that's the case, then you're going to want to use light painting. So with light painting, it's really about trial and error. And you know, you're going to put some light on the tree, and the first time you do it, it's probably not going to look very good. I think probably the most common mistake is to put too much light on the object and just it over brightens it. It doesn't take much, and the closer the object is to you in the camera, the less light you need to shine on it. The amount of light you put on the object is going to be determined by the length of time that you flash light on it, right? So, so if I flash light on that tree for about a half a second, that might be just about the right amount of light that I need for the tree. Anything more than that is going to be way too bright, so it doesn't take much. So the other common mistake with light painting is not getting an even light on the subject. So you just flash the light at the tree and maybe half the tree is really lit up and the other half is shadowy. So, so you want to make sure that you're painting evenly across the object that you want to lighten up. So the best thing to do is just to, just keep shooting until, until your light painting looks like what you want it to look like. Okay, so you've been out here for a while, you've been painting your tree and, and just experimenting with the different lighting, different compositions. And if you're doing like 20, 30-second exposures, you're talking several minutes of just trying to get a decent shot of that foreground. So meanwhile, what's happening is that the Milky Way is changing position in the sky. So just be aware that, that if you're going to be out here for 2 or 3 hours, you're going to see some changes, which can be kind of interesting, going from horizontal to vertical compositions. If all you've done is taken one shot, and that's what we're talking about here, just one shot. There's no stitching going on here, and nothing special. Just one shot of the Milky Way. That's really the editing is going to be quite easy. It's just a matter of bringing out the contrast in those stars in the Milky Way. If you have a painted foreground, you may be able to get away with one shot, if you see adequate sharpness throughout. Sometimes I focus on the foreground, the painted tree, for instance, and I'll get a sharp image of the tree, and then I will blend that with my sharp image of the Milky Way. That's about as complicated or sophisticated as I get with the Milky Way shots. So let's summarize a little bit here. So you have a SLR camera, you have a wide-angle lens, you have a tripod and a ball head, and you have a headlamp or at least a flashlight. You are ready to go photograph the Milky Way. You just need to find out where and when you're going to have that opportunity. And you're going to need to have weather that cooperates so that you can get out there with a clear sky and, a little bit of clouds maybe, but you definitely don't want clouds over the Milky Way. I guarantee you when you get your first Milky Way shot, it won't be your last.